So welcome to the March 2023 Brunch and Learn with Community Action. I hope you have brunch. I like mine in coffee form, so if you've got a snack, feel free to enjoy it while we talk here today. I'm Liz Jennings, Director of Community Engagement for Community Action of Skagit County. And we want to welcome you all. This Brunch and Learn series we started up in 2022 because back in the before times, before the pandemic, we would get together monthly with our community action staff and volunteers, board members, donors, and lots of community partners once a month to learn about a big community issue, what kinds of plans and collaboration are going on across the county on that issue. And then we wanted to talk about community action's role in that solution. So it's a way to do a little bit of a deeper dive into community action's programs and activities. So I'm not going to talk too much today about everything community action does. We like to remind folks that if you've got questions, you can always go to our website. And we've rearranged things. Thank you, Isabella Ordonez, so that from a client's point of view or a program participant's point of view, people can look for food, basic needs, help paying the bills. Big part of our work is housing, and of course we've got programs for families, seniors, veterans, and others, and these services are available across the county. Community Action's mission is down at the bottom. Our vision is a community in which everyone works together to end poverty in Skagit County, and our mission is to stabilize lives, equip people to meet their goals, and to build a stronger, more equitable Skagit County. And today's topic is on public policy advocacy. I just need to ask, was I showing the website just now? Okay, I'm glad I wasn't showing everyone my notes. So today's topic is on public policy advocacy, and that's really one of the ways we do that third part of the mission of building stronger communities. Today, we're going to hear from my boss, Bill Henkel, our executive director. Give everyone a wave, Bill. We're going to be joined by Misty Velasquez, our energy program manager, Wendy Dahlstead, our WIC manager, and Isabella Ordonez, our community engagement coordinator. We're going to talk a little bit about what is public policy advocacy. Why does community engagement, or why does community action engage in public policy advocacy, and why do we get others to join us in this work? We're going to hear some results of our public policy advocacy, and then we're going to let you know how you can get involved, what some of the big issues in the state legislature are this year. And I am just responding to one of our panelists for the link for the Brunch and Learn. Sorry for the pause. All right, so let's get started. So what is public policy advocacy? Many of us here today work in human services, and so that phrase advocacy, I see some of our friends from different organizations, and their staff and volunteers are advocates. Our own staff at Community Action are advocates for clients, but we're not talking about client or program participant advocacy today. That generally is advocacy for an individual or a family, helping them navigate systems and figure out how to find what they need, how to advocate for themselves within systems to get what they need. What we're talking today about is public policy advocacy, which can range from community education, research and reporting. For us, it's on poverty issues, on hunger, on housing issues and homelessness, on basic needs, reporting that back to the community and to decision makers. Advocacy can also include just simply saying, hello, my name is Liz, I care about housing, because it's a huge issue in our community. Whatever it is that you care about, when you tell somebody why you care about it, that's being an advocate in our community. And really, that is the foundation of the type of advocacy that we do this time of year, which is legislative education and lobbying. And yes, it's perfectly okay for nonprofit organizations to do lobbying with a capital L. There's just limits. We don't use federal funds to do lobbying, but it is well within our rights and sometimes even in our missions to ask our elected officials to take a stand on public policies and to make good decisions around budgets and public spending. So I'm going to start by asking Bill. Tell us a little bit about the history of how did community action of Skagit County get involved in public policy advocacy?
Good morning, everybody. Bill Hinkle, Executive Director, Community Action. Thank you, Liz. Great to be with you all. I see lots of experts in this room. We're generalists, but here we are trying to work together on advocacy. Yeah, usually Liz will start by saying equally, or even in some cases more important than actually serving people, is changing attitudes and practices towards people in poverty. And another illustration that's used a lot is, or the term of going upstream. You probably have all heard that there was a group of physicians taking broken bodies out of a stream and trying to fix them. And then somebody quite intelligently said, "Hey, why are all these people floating downstream and in a broken way, either their bodies or their souls? Let's go upstream and see who's chucking these folks in the water injured." And that is a lot like public policy advocacy. That's a way to go upstream and say, how do we try to get services and policies and resources changed so that we either can have less people going injured into this stream or fix them better when they float down the stream. Terry Belko, some of you might know him. There's a Skagit Changemaker Award that was named after him that we're still giving out each year, a group of organizations. And he was my mentor and our board president years ago, back in 2008. He encouraged us to add the word advocacy to our mission statement because of that why. And that started us on a journey. Liz and Isabella, for years, many of you might have been on. We used to, before COVID, take a busload of folks from Skagit and some from neighboring communities down en masse to Olympia to visit with the legislators from the 10th, 39th, and 40th. And man, those were just awesome days. It's a long bus ride, but Liz would give a tour of the Capitol. We had partners, we had kids, we had people experiencing homelessness, we had staff, we had board members, we had volunteers, and it was always a powerful experience to go down and meet with the 9 folks that represent us in Olympia. And I would be down there with our state network, and I'd try to meet up with folks, and you never knew who was going to show up. And there we'd go, and people would share their stories and learn a little bit about advocacy. And a few years ago, Liz, I'm blanking on which year, but Thomas Boucher, who used to work for Representative Congressman Rick Larson, was on our board, and he created CREATE, which is our sort of our advocacy committee at a board level. And we have a lot of community members on that. And CREATE, Thomas's clever acronym, means Community Relationships Education Advocacy Task Force, or CREATE. Well, CREAT, but we just say CREATE. You know, the grand secret of advocacy here, we'll spill the beans, and you probably already know this, is legislators are people. And most, if not all, really want to do good in the world and for their communities, no matter which side of the aisle they're on. The bad ones they send up to the feds. No, I'm just kidding. But amazing folks. And it really is just about getting to know people and have them trust you and be able to relay information from the community that is important for our legislators to know from our own lived experience. And that's what CREATE was formed to do, is form long-term relationships. So I'll stop there, Liz. I think there's a lot more to say, but that's a brief history anyway.
Yeah, and for anyone here who knows me, you know that I am a nonprofit nerd and I love a mental model. And I want to share with you all how advocacy fits into our community engagement strategy. So as Bill said, community action is Skagit County, all the community action agencies around the nation, there's 1,000 of them. There's 30 community action agencies in the state of Washington. And as Bill said, we're charged not only with serving people experiencing poverty, but also, and it says in our founding documents, even more important than the services we provide is changing attitudes and practices towards people experiencing poverty. And attitudes and practices, that's bias, that's belief, that's values. And that leads to public policies. And so we do a lot of things on our community engagement team, and shout out to Isabella and Josh and Tracy, Emily, Philip, who are a part of that team. And this is our full community engagement strategy. So we do that research and reporting on that experience of poverty and homelessness. We do needs assessments. We look at community level data. We read reports from our partners. So we learn, we also then report back to the community. So we give presentations, workshops, poverty simulations to help community members really learn and understand, and to change those attitudes so that they can help change the practices in the community. So learning is one part of our community engagement strategy. Volunteering is another important part of our community engagement strategy. I saw a couple of volunteers on the call today. Shout out to Peggy and others, Curtis, who have volunteered with community action in the past. And when people volunteer, they learn more about the issues, and it's a way that they can change someone's life right now. So our senior and disabled services program engages volunteers, Medicaid transportation, street outreach, our food distribution center, all kinds of ways for people to continue that learning and build their relationship with people experiencing the conditions we're trying to change. So public policy advocacy is a really important part of this overall community engagement strategy. As we're building relationships over time, yeah, some people want to help as a volunteer. Other people want to do, as Bill said, they want to work on those upstream solutions. They want to look at root causes and solutions to the problem so that there's fewer people experiencing those problems in our community. We also include philanthropy, donor development, working with foundations and grants. That giving strategy is really an important way that some people are able to help us change attitudes and practices and to provide these essential services. And then, of course, there's the coordination piece. So many of you are coalition partners with community action. Working together, we all can do more than we can separately. No one organization can achieve our vision. Our vision is that everyone in Skagit County is working together to end poverty. That is not community action's job, that's all of our jobs. So coordination, coalition work, special initiatives, helping to launch the housing consortium, things along those lines. And then of course, across it all, you'll see that we try to take the lead of people with lived experience. Many of our staff and volunteers have our own journeys through poverty. And then certainly we listen to the people that we serve. We get them on our board of directors. We get them on the bus to Olympia to tell their own stories. Through our Latinx advisory committee, we have public policy listening sessions and candidate forums so that people can tell decision makers their own stories and their vision for the future and how they see that we can build a stronger community together. And as Bill mentioned, all of this is about building long-term reciprocal relationships. So when we're talking about public policy advocacy, we're not in it just to be right or to win. We're in it to build long-term relationships with folks in decision-making power so that we can do those big things that we have to do as a community to make those upstream changes. So that's our community engagement strategy, and public policy advocacy is a core piece of that. So again, why? Bill, let's talk a little bit about actual changes in the community that have come about because of community action, but also advocates at other organizations, community members. I call them free range citizens, professional citizens who speak up and talk to their elected officials. Let's start with something that happened at the federal level. Tell us the story about WIC and the Naval Air Station on Whidbey Island.
Sure, glad to. And I see Wendy Dulcett's here, and so she can fill in some of the impact. But back in the day, it's been a while now. We serve, by the way, our WIC, Credible WIC program serves directly on Whidbey Naval Air Station, and you should know that military families often have to rely on sources like WIC and others to keep their kids and families healthy, and that's just a reality of the pay they have. So we're serving directly on Whidbey Naval Air Station, and there was a rule that came into effect that essentially kicked all vendors off of military stations and naval air stations. And unfortunately, as sort of the baby with the bathwater, it threatened to kick off WIC. And so I was back in DC visiting Senator Patty Murray and Congressman Rick Larsen, and I'll just add this little tidbit, then hand it over to Wendy. And nervous I was early on in my career. You know, you kind of get overwhelmed by DC and the like. And I walked into Rick Larsen's office, and he had all his aides around him, and he was busy, and he was working on something. And he turned around and he said, Bill, I'll give you 3 minutes. It better be the best 3 minutes of your life. And I was like, oh, and he was kind of kidding, but he was kind of not, you know, he's quite a card. And so I said, well, you know, Congressman Larsen, there's a new rule that's kicking WIC off of Whidbey Naval Air Station. I believe it's happening around the country. Similar stories are happening. And he said, what? That's crazy. So his team reached out to Patty Murray, Senator Patty Murray, and then they got in touch with Wendy and the crew out at Whidbey NAS, and they actually went at the federal agency level to get the entire rule changed to allow WIC to remain on the Naval Air Station in Whidbey and across the country. So it's really quite a big deal. And we got a letter from the senator saying that rule had changed. And so we were really proud to be part of that. But I'll hand it over to Wendy to fill in a little bit of color of why that might matter.
Yeah, so Wendy, that was a really big deal. It's not only community action of Skagit County's WIC program getting to stay on Naval Air Station on Whidbey Island. It affected military families across the country. So why was this important? What difference does this make in people's lives?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, and we did a survey of our clients out on the Navy base, they're accustomed to getting their social services through the Navy base. And they have a disinclination to go off the base for civilian services. And I think that was the biggest impetus. These young families are very alone. They need a lot of support. And it would have meant that they wouldn't, a large number of them, probably half, wouldn't have reached out for any of that support off the base. So, and Patty Murray had enough clout in the Senate. She went to all the way to the top, to the Department of Defense, to get that ruling. And I think because of her reputation and her urging is why they went ahead and allowed us to stay there on the base where people feel they're being supported within their own community.
Thank you, Wendy. And can we get a hip, hip hooray for successful advocacy? So that is just one example. I've got another example here behind me. Bill, can you tell the story? Looks like this is backwards on everybody's screen, but why do we have a box with a ruby slipper in it sitting on Liz's desk?
Well, you might remember a famous movie that has a ruby slipper in it where a famous actress said there's no place like home several times. So the ruby slipper is from the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. And I think, Liz, that was 2013, but gosh, my memory is getting a little dusty here. But oh, great. We were pleased to be awarded the Advocacy Organization of the Year by the Washington State Low Income Housing Alliance. But really, it was another one of those collective efforts. It was during a legislative session where they were trying to put into place housing and essential needs, which is a major source of supporting people experiencing homelessness right now. Some people call it HEN, but it's housing and essential needs. And many of our staff testified to the impact of that. Jen Milton, who used to work with us specifically, was asked to testify. She jumped in her car about an hour later and drove down to Olympia. Never had done it before, but got in front of a group of legislators and testified to what was going on with people experiencing homelessness in Skagit County and why that would be so important. And it was helpful in allowing that legislation to pass. And it's still a really, really key source of support for our community. And there might be some good stories related to that, Liz, you or others might share. But that's what the Ruby Slipper was about. And we're proud to have it.
Yeah, housing and essential needs is an important program. It is not a lot of support for families, households without a home, but it is something. And sometimes it makes all of the difference in the world for a family to gain stability and to be able to secure housing. And with that, when Community Action is providing HEN, housing and essential needs, that means that we're providing case management and other wraparound services, other care coordination to help stabilize that family who is struggling with their housing. I want to go next to Misty Velasquez, who is our Energy Programs Manager. And Misty, I understand that recently one of our national coalitions actually encouraged us to advocate for LIHEAP. And I'm going to ask you what LIHEAP is, and then I'm going to ask you about the impacts that LIHEAP has on people's families. And then finally, I'll ask you about what you were doing about a week ago. So what is LIHEAP?
Well, LIHEAP is the federal program. It's the Low Income Housing, Energy, and Assistance Program. We serve about 150% of the federal poverty level, people can qualify to get heating assistance. So we serve energy, basically electric, Cascade natural gas, propane, oil, wood, any way that a person may heat their home. And if you want to know what 150% of the FPL is for a household of 4, they cannot make any more than $3,469. So it's our lowest of lowest income levels in the community.
And what difference does it make? So people don't have to be behind on their bills for our energy assistance program. It's literally, it can be a credit for future costs. What kind of a difference does that make in people's lives? What do you hear from the people you serve in terms of what they're able to do because of energy assistance?
So depending on how much energy they use in their home or what they heat their home with, they can sometimes get up to $1,000 as a grant, and it goes on to their account. So say they use propane, they could get up to $1,000 that gets sent to their propane company, and that allows them to be able to buy medications, buy other food that maybe they don't have enough food with their food stamps. It allows them to purchase school supplies for their children. We're doing a photo competition, not competition, but opportunity at the moment where clients get to tell us what our services are allowing them to do. And one of the cutest little pictures was this little girl on there stating that her parents were able to get her school supplies. And I mean, think about it, school supplies, it's something simple as getting that because a person didn't have to pay a way to heat their home for a while. It's not going to cover 100% of the cost, but it's going to cover a good portion of it.
So really important in many people's lives. And there was some talk that funding might be threatened. So what did you do recently?
So I don't know if anybody here realizes how the budgets work, but our normal typical budget from LIHEAP is $3.2 billion that they give in regular LIHEAP funding. And then anything
that's nationwide.
That's nationwide. Yeah, it's not just Washington State. That goes through the entire United States. And then anything above and beyond that gets put into appropriations acts. And this last year, we ended up getting $5.2 billion given out for LIHEAP through regular funding and appropriations. The problem was the regular funding was only granted at 1.6 billion, and all of the rest of the money came in appropriations, which is not guaranteed money. And so we went to Washington, D.C. to advocate that our clients need this money. It is very important, and it should be guaranteed money up front. We shouldn't be relying on appropriations to fund a program that is that important. And so we went asking, we had people asking, we were there to tell the stories from our client side, what was important. So they were asking that we keep the funding at the 5.1 billion level, but have it be as 100% funded funding through the actual program and not in appropriations. The good thing about it is I've been to both. I've been to Olympia. I've also been to Washington, D.C. now, and I would have to say I feel that going to Washington, D.C. was way more, we had a lot more participation. We got to spend half an hour one-on-one with our legislators, one-on-one. We weren't in a group. It was just us with them. So 100% of their time, they were focused on us and what we were talking about, which was amazing because they were totally engaged in everything that we were talking about. They were asking questions. We were answering questions. It was phenomenal. We really had a good time and felt that we made a huge difference over there. So
let's give it up for advocates. Oh, there's that photo. Thank you, Philip, for showing that awesome photo. And Josh, I think we're going to get you in there with some photoshopping so we can read what the little girl had on there. What did it say, Misty?
It said that was the one that said that her family could buy school supplies, basically.
Yeah, energy assistance helps helps out, but helps us buy school supplies for our families' kids.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you, Misty. So advocacy, it does make a difference. And one of the things that you said, Misty, that when we are able to have constituents meet with their legislators, which Isabella is going to talk about in a little bit. We're going to end today with opportunities for anyone here, if you'd like to join us in one of those meetings for the state legislature. We're going to hear more about that. But one of the reasons that we do it, not only so that we all and our clients and the people we serve, people with lived experience, can share their stories and the impact that these programs have, but also to demystify it. That sometimes when we think about lawmakers and politicians, some of us kind of think that politics are icky or weird. And one of the great things about meeting with decision makers is we find out they're just folks. They are our neighbors, and especially in the state legislature where people are literally our neighbors. So in Skagit County, we have 3 legislative districts in our state legislature. We have the 39th, the 40th, and the 10th. And in each district, there's 2 representatives and 1 senator. So there are 9 folks in Olympia representing our interests. And as Bill said, our board, Community Actions Board of Directors, create the Community Relationships, Education, and Advocacy Task Force. They're laser focused on these long-term relationships. So we're not just talking with them during the legislative session, but throughout the year, giving them these stories, telling them about the impacts of the decisions that they're making. And so each year, the state legislature operates in what's called a biennium. That's 2 years. And each year, or on the first year of the biennium, it's what's called a long session. So our legislators are in Olympia, or during the pandemic, virtually in Olympia, from January through April. And then the second year is a shorter session. And that's because in this first year, there are big decisions that are made about policy and with budget. So the budget is set, the state budget is set for the 2-year biennium this year. And often a policy decision needs to come with money as well. So what do we actually advocate on at Community Action? How do we make those decisions? Bill, can you talk a little bit about the importance of our partners in Skagit County, that are our partners in food security, housing, homelessness prevention, those partners and our state partners, coalitions, how we work with them to set our own agenda?
Sure, yeah. It's a huge team effort, really. We've got at the state level, there's a lot of partners and coalitions that feed us information about what's going on in Olympia. We've got community action partnerships. There's 30 community action agencies that cover every county in the state. And so that's a powerful group. And then I mentioned before the Washington State Low Income Housing Alliance. That's another really powerful policy and advocacy partner that we generally take their housing priorities and build it into ours as well. And of course, you only get a certain amount of time, so you have to narrow it down. Northwest Harvest deals with food security issues and is kind of the lead for that. And there's a lot of action this year because there's quite a food shortage in the emergency food system as well. So Northwest Harvest is another one at the state level. And there are many others. And of course, here locally, there's the Homeless Coalition and the Food Bank Association and other coalitions that work in early childhood development, and it goes on and on. Those folks are wonderfully networks and experts and connected people who are even more experts because they're living their lives and they understand what's impacting them. So we filter down from all of our coalition partners at the state and local level into our own set of priorities. Liz is showing this year what we're working on. Some of this is community action specific. Most of it is beyond that, but community services block grant funding, the state of Washington for the first time any state in the country matched the federal, it's called CSBG grant that goes through the Community Action Network to solve poverty on the local level. And last year that was focused mostly on better serving people experiencing poverty in rural areas and BIPOC communities. And so Liz or others could talk about how we use that. Liz, do you want me to keep on going on some of our priorities this year, or just pause?
I'll give some examples. So the reason that CSBG is so important to community action of Skagit County is because that community services block grant funding, unlike most of our programs, like energy assistance, Misty gets money from the feds through the state. It's LIHEAP funding, and it has to be used for energy assistance. Community services block grant funding is different. It's flexible funding so that community action agencies can be flexible and adjust quickly and serve emerging community needs. So an example here is with that state CSBG funding. I believe it was about, Bill, you can correct me, but I think it was about $250,000 that we got from that state CSBG proviso. And there were 3 programs that fit into the rural and or BIPOC area that funding was supposed to go to, but we could be super flexible within those guidelines. So in part, we did support our WIC program. WIC is one of those programs where the federal WIC funding is very specific. It's for food, it's for nutrition education, and it doesn't provide much flexibility for other types of family supports. And so we used some of our CSBG funding so that WIC could hire a mixed text speaking staff member and to provide more things like diapers and things for families that the federal funds don't necessarily cover. So we were able to expand our service to better serve farm workers and to provide basic needs for families. The second area that we were able to fund with CSBG was our East County Resource Center in Concrete. And maybe Isabella, could you find that webpage and share screen? So Community Action of Skagit County has services centers, and anyone can reach us by phone and online, and they can also walk in our front door in Mount Vernon or in the East County Resource Center in Concrete, and soon we'll have a resource center in Anacortes as well. And East County funding for that rural area is very important because the poverty level is higher in rural and isolated parts of Skagit County than it is anywhere else. And so having that front door to services in East County is incredibly important. And there's also space there for partners to be able to provide veterans services or for DSHS CSO to come out and serve people out there. So WIC, East County, and then the third area of support is our own community engagement team and our work with the Latinx Advisory Committee. And because of that flexible funding, our amazing board members, Katie Ortiz, Christina Soltero, Sylvia Reed, because of CSBG flexible funding, we were able to partner with public health during the pandemic to host the Skagit Latinx COVID prevention team. And this was an effort, a community collaboration, one of those coalition efforts where community action wasn't going to solve COVID for this population, but we could set the table and bring providers and decision makers together to see what was working and what wasn't working in COVID prevention and later in vaccination. So that's one of the reasons that CSBG funding is so important, and one of the reasons why it's on the top of Community Action's list for our advocacy strategy this year. Bill, there's one other kind of community action specific project that is on the Community Action of Skagit County legislative agenda. Can you speak about the community projects applications?
This is a first ask for us. We haven't done, they're called local community projects, and they're direct appropriations from the state to local communities to build things mainly. We requested 300,000. Rep Alex Ramel in the 40th is our lead sponsor on that, to cover the costs. So we just purchased property in Mount Vernon by LaVenture Middle School. It's about 1.5 acres that we intend to develop 50 to 55 units of apartment units. We just had a discussion with some of the good folks at Mount Vernon School District yesterday, and we'll see, but we think it's going to be a partnership with the school district, and we're excited about that and where it might take us. 300,000 would cover the purchase costs and some of the design costs as we understand what population we want to serve and how to best design it, and then that will drive sort of our fundraising strategy. So it's on the state level, that's a modest ask, but it's a big deal for us, and we hope we get it.
So again, the importance of long-term relationship building. One really cool thing with these two priorities is just seeing those relationships develop over time. With CSBG, that community services block grant funding, that's going to be able to provide services, that flexible funding for folks across the state with 30 community action agencies. And it's moving in the House of Representatives because of Skagit relationships. Bill, do you want to just mention who the sponsor in the House is for the CSBG ask?
Sure. Representative Deb Lakenoff, many of you might know her from the 40th. She was chosen to approach because of her twin interest in serving BIPOC communities in rural areas, which portions of Skagit are. And so she's great. We asked her and she said yes. And as Liz said, I think it takes some trust building over time, often to get to that level where you can both have an intersection of interest, but also a willingness to say yes, because legislators have so many things on their to-do list. So we really, really appreciate that.
And that trust building goes both ways. So we made an ask of Representative Lakenoff. We made an ask of Representative Ramel to carry our community projects request. But sometimes this long-term relationship building means that decision makers come to us. And can you describe a time recently, Bill, when I believe it was a Republican from another district that came to us with a question and a request?
I'm trying to remember which one of the many that we were talking about.
Representative Eslick.
Oh, Representative Eslick. Yes, thank you. Sorry, it's not a Monday, but my brain is in Monday mode. We've worked with Representative Eslick. She's from the 39th Republican, and she has a deep interest in the issue of homelessness and behavioral health issues, and also serving rural communities. One of the things that she got some money a couple years back in the state legislature was for family resource centers. So she came by and let us know that we were actually eligible for it and encouraged us to apply. And we were able to get that support that helps us do the resource center type thing where we have multiple services and people are coming in and getting connected, not just our stuff, but across across the spectrum. There's a group with the Children's Museum and other early childhood providers who also got some of that funding this year through her, and they're doing family resource centers for parents who have a question for how they get connected to resources specifically for parents, some of which we do, but they have that focus specialty. And so that was pretty neat. She just showed up and said, hey, we got this thing, go for it. And we were pleased to get that as well.
So our local agenda, community action of Skagit County, obviously we're focused in on a couple of things that directly relate to funding programs that serve the people that we serve. And we also have a support agenda. And sometimes, like, I will sign in to give testimony at a hearings at the Senate Ways and Means Committee or House Appropriations Committee on issues that impact not just community action, but lots and lots of our partners. So while we have this focus on the Community Services Block Grant and the Community Projects application this year, we're also out there stumping for all of our partners in Skagit County and across the state who work in the field of housing and homeless services, and food and nutrition. And these are really important right now. And there's a jargony term called document recording fees that Bill, can you explain what a document recording fee is and why it's important? And then I'll give some examples from our housing team of the impact.
Yeah, sure. The state legislature, you know, that we don't have an income tax in the state of Washington. So we're known as one of the more regressive tax systems in the country because it's based on sales tax. As the state legislature, which has been dedicated to solving the housing homeless issue for years, was searching for how do we support and fund these things. They came up with the notion of adding fees to the documents you record when you purchase a house, or if you, well, it's mainly around house purchases, and if you're refinancing and the like, there's a few other things that it applies to. And it's relatively small. If you've bought a house, you'll note a couple $100 for document recording fees for whatever you paid for your house. It is not very noticeable, I have to say. I just purchased a house a couple of years ago, but it does tremendous good. It funds at the local level. A bunch of that money stays in Skagit County or whatever county of origin. Some of it goes to the state, and the state funds things like the Consolidated Homeless Grant, which is a major source of preventing homelessness in the state. So it's huge money. The downside to that is, here we are, interest rates are high and people aren't buying homes or refinancing. And it's the amount of recording has decreased. We know from our friends at the county in Skagit, 50% or more. It's about 50% across the state in terms of the drop. And that directly impacts our ability to address homelessness and to do creative things that, like we and many of our partners are trying to do in terms of creating housing that people can afford. And it's a big deal. You know, sadly, I'd say, this was supposed to be the legislature that was going to be historic in terms of addressing homelessness and housing. And the governor started with a bang in terms of a really, really big numbers, billions of what was going to be used to address housing and homelessness across the state. Very exciting. There's a lot of supporters in locally and in Olympia. At the same time, the major source for addressing the problem just shrunk by half. And so in Skagit County, for our portion, we know from our the good folks in public health that it went from about 1.7 million worth of resources to address the issue locally to about 732,000. And that's a pretty draconian drop. And so there is a big effort at the state level to backfill that that drop. Unfortunately, the money that they're talking about now would only address the drop at the state level of what they collect and keep and provide in terms of the state level homeless services, not the local funding, which is right now is going to shrink if we don't do something about it regardless. So it's a big deal. And some of our staff could do a much better job in terms of the real life impact of what services aren't going to be in the community because of it.
And to be clear, when you're saying that drop is not just for community action, it's for many, many housing and homeless service providers. So it's almost $771,000 reduction in funds at the local level through the county. And that's for many providers, not just community action. And then it's $180,000 of state homeless funding that is also being reduced. But that 180 is the only part that the legislature is currently talking about backfilling. So we're looking at a possible $771,000 drop in the county. So I'd like to note that Christine, thank you, Christine, always an advocate, asked about bill numbers. And right now we don't have bill numbers on these things. So this is early in the session, and there's a lot of sausage being made. Our legislators know this is an issue. So we don't have bill numbers yet on the document recording fee issue, the solution to the document recording fee problem. And I do want to just move on and quickly say that another area that we're really looking at in addition to the document recording fee homeless services is a food and nutrition bill that we do have a bill number on, and I'm going to share screen again. As many of you know, food's gotten more expensive, and the federal funding for food and nutrition programs and food banks has gone down since COVID, while the need that our clients have seen and the food bank clients have seen, the families, the customers of food banks, has leveled off and even gone up because of the recent spike in food prices. So there's a House Bill 1984 that would benefit Community Action's Food Distribution Center, which gets a lot of the food, used to get a lot of the food out to local food pantries and food banks. But that, again, the resource has gotten smaller, and it would help food banks directly. And so it would provide food, it provides infrastructure, and some operational funding as well. So again, that's one to watch. It's in motion right now, House Bill 1984. So lots to talk about here. We do want to take some time for questions, but I want to do a shout out to Isabella Ordonez, who for nearly 10 years has helped coordinate our advocacy efforts, the bus trips to Olympia, and some upcoming opportunities that you're going to let people know about after this meeting. You're going to email them about it. What's going on, Isabella?
Hey there. Yeah. So I was just looking at that picture with all of us in the blue shirts, and that was 2014. So we've been doing this for, almost 10 years. There's Bill and I in that picture, and I think you took, you're behind the camera, Liz. So a couple of calls to actions that we have are, the first one is you can sign up for action alerts. So community action during the legislative session will send out action alerts with like this information that we were talking about, like when things are moving or if people should be making an ask or, talking to your legislators or supporting a bill. And you can do that by emailing me or Liz or at advocacy@communityactionskagit.org to get on those lists. And you're also welcome just to go to any of our coalition partners like the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, Northwest Harvest, and sign up for those lists, because everyone has like their own legislative priorities. But I feel like we do a pretty good job about like summarizing and going through a lot of the information that's out there. I would also say that you can sign up for your legislators' email lists. And for those of you that don't know how to find your legislator, you could just easily type in, you know, who's my legislator, Washington State, you type in your address and it will show you who your 2 representatives are, who your state senator is, and you can sign up for their newsletters to see what they're doing, what their priorities are during the legislative session. And Liz and I are subscribed to all 9 people, so it's hard to keep up with everyone, but it's really nice to see what's happening during the session. Yeah, there it is, super easy. Just type in, yeah, your address, and then it'll pop up a list of everyone's contact information. Legislators are pretty easy to get a hold of. Their information's pretty easy to find. And so the next thing that we're also doing is scheduling constituent meetings between March 9th and March 22nd. And Bill was kind of saying, back in the day, we used to take a bus down with like 40 people, you know, community action staff, their children, people with lived experience to come down, tour the Capitol, speak to your legislators, share your stories, make an ask. It was just like really cool because a lot of people had never gone before. We're still doing our meetings this year via Zoom. So that will allow for a lot more flexibility. So stay tuned. I'll be sending out an email with a link so that if you're interested in joining us, you can, yeah, you'll have that information. Thank you.
So big shout out to Isabella, who is setting up meetings with all 9 of our legislators. And that includes 2 new legislators in 2 of the districts. So these meetings, these constituent meetings, it's a great way you can sit back and just observe if you've never been in a delegation meeting before. A delegation is just a group of people going to talk to the people who represent them in the state legislature. And Bill is our delegation lead, who's going to be making some asks on the issues that you heard about today. And most of those meetings are 15 minutes to half an hour, depending on the legislator's time, because they are in session. They tend to be shorter meetings than when we meet with them out of session. And there is usually time for 1 or 2 folks to share a story about the issues that we're talking about: housing, food, and basic needs. And so when Isabella sends out that follow-up email with all these different ways to be involved, you can choose to sign up for your 10th, 39th, or 40th district representative, and we'll give you a little primer on what to expect. And you just hit that Zoom link, and from the comfort of your own home or office, you can join those constituent meetings. So thank you again, Isabella, for doing all of that legwork all of these years. So we don't have a lot of time for questions, but we do want to open it up. If anyone would like to share a question, we don't have time for people to share all of your great advocacy opportunities, but we hope that you connect with one another on that outside of this call. But any questions about community actions, why we do advocacy, what our advocacy efforts are, or how you can make a difference? Well, I just want to say thank you to all of you. I see on this call, there's a number of people who have gotten on that bus to Olympia with us, or the virtual Zoom bus as it is now. And we really appreciate you. There's folks on this call that have helped out with sharing your experience at our Latinx Advisory Committee public policy listening sessions. And we just appreciate everyone's partnership, because together, as you've heard today, we are making a difference for people who are experiencing poverty in Skagit County right now, and we're changing the community to reduce that need in the future. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Misty and Wendy. Thank you, Isabella.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Isabella.